The August heat pressed down on Emma Reeves like a physical weight as she stood on the parched New Mexico soil. At 42, she had expected to be settled somewhere with roots by now. Instead, here she was, starting over with architectural plans for an adobe home she intended to build largely by herself. "You're out of your mind, Emma," she muttered, pushing back a strand of dark hair streaked with silver. After 20 years designing luxury homes in Chicago, burnout had finally caught up with her. The divorce 3 years ago had only accelerated her desire for change. The small trailer she'd purchased to live in during construction sat at the edge of the property, looking forlorn and temporary. Emma walked the perimeter of where her home would stand, mentally placing each room, each window that would frame the distant mountains. "Need a hand with anything?" The voice startled her. Emma turned to find a man in his late 40s, standing at what would someday be her property line. He wore a weathered cowboy hat and a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up. "I'm fine, thanks," Emma replied, instantly defensive. "Suit yourself." He nodded politely. "I'm Daniel Harmon, your neighbor to the west." He gestured toward a distant roofline just visible beyond a stand of piñon pines. "Emma Reeves." She didn't offer her hand, but gave a tight smile. "Just getting my bearings before the real work starts." "Adobe?" Daniel asked, nodding toward the plans tucked under her arm. "Yes, traditional methods, with some modern adaptations for energy efficiency. Bold choice for someone working alone." It wasn't a criticism, just an observation. "I'm hiring help for the foundation and framing," Emma clarified, "but I'll be doing a lot myself. I used to be an architect in Chicago." Daniel nodded. "Well, if you need to borrow any tools or have questions about building out here, I'm just down the road. The desert has its own rules." Before Emma could respond, a battered pickup truck appeared. "That'll be my contractor," she said, relieved. "I'll leave you to it then." Daniel tipped his hat slightly. "Welcome to the neighborhood, Ms. Reeves." As he walked away, Emma found herself watching his retreating form longer than necessary. There was something in his careful, measured movements that suggested a man who had learned to move through the world deliberately. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. The foundation was poured, and Emma learned the back-breaking work of making adobe bricks. A mixture of clay-rich soil, sand, straw, and water, formed in wooden molds and left to dry in the sun. It was exhausting, meditative work that left her muscles aching and her mind quieter than it had been in years. One evening, as Emma sat outside her trailer watching the sunset, her phone rang. It was her daughter Lily calling from college in Boston. "Mom, how's the desert hermit life?" Lily's voice was bright and teasing. "It's hardly hermit life," Emma replied, smiling. "I've got contractors coming and going, and I'm learning more about mud than I ever wanted to know." "I still can't believe you're actually building a house with mud," Lily said skeptically. "Dad says you're having a midlife crisis." Emma bit back a sharp retort about her ex-husband's opinion. "It's not just mud. Adobe construction has been used in this region for centuries. It's sustainable, energy efficient, and perfectly suited to the climate." "If you say so," Lily replied, unconvinced. "Are you making any friends out there in the middle of nowhere?" Emma thought briefly of Daniel, her reticent neighbor. "I'm not here to make friends, honey. I'm here to build something meaningful." "You know what I mean, Mom. I worry about you being all alone." "I'm fine, Lily, better than fine, actually." Emma surprised herself with the realization that this was true. The next morning, Emma woke before dawn, as had become her habit. She made coffee and stepped outside to watch the sunrise. In the grey light of early morning, she noticed something different at the edge of her property, a stack of wooden pallets that hadn't been there the night before. Approaching cautiously, she found a handwritten note. "Noticed you were running low on drying racks for your bricks. These might help. D.H." Emma stood staring at the note, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to march right over to Daniel Harmon's house and tell him she didn't need his charity. But another part recognized the simple kindness of the gesture. By mid-September, the walls of Emma's adobe home were beginning to rise from the foundation. Mike Sandoval and his small crew handled the structural elements, while Emma worked alongside them, learning as she went. "You're a natural at this," Mike commented one afternoon. "Most city folks would have given up by now." "I'm too stubborn to give up," Emma replied with a small smile. "And maybe too broke to hire someone else to do it all." Mike laughed. "Well, whatever the reason, you're doing good work. This house is going to have soul." That evening, as the crew packed up for the day, Emma noticed a dust cloud approaching on the road. Daniel Harmon's truck pulled up, and he stepped out, carrying a small cooler. Thought you might appreciate some fresh vegetables, he said. My garden's producing more than I can eat. Emma hesitated only briefly before accepting the cooler. Thank you for the pallets, too, she said. They've been very helpful. Daniel nodded. His eyes moved past her to the partially constructed walls. Coming along nicely, he observed. Would you like to see it? Emma surprised herself with the offer. They walked together toward the structure. The foundation and first few feet of walls were complete, with the interior spaces beginning to take shape. It's a passive solar design, Emma explained. The thick adobe walls will absorb heat during the day and release it at night. South-facing windows for winter sun, deep overhangs to block summer heat. Daniel listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions. Emma found herself relaxing into the conversation, enjoying the chance to share her knowledge with someone who seemed genuinely interested. You've thought of everything, he said finally. Occupational hazard, Emma replied with a small shrug. I spent 20 years designing homes for other people. I've had a lot of time to think about what I'd do differently for myself. And what's that? Daniel asked, his blue eyes curious. Emma considered the question. Authenticity, I guess, no wasted space, nothing that's just for show. She gestured toward the simple, efficient layout. Every part of this house has a purpose. It's honest. Daniel nodded slowly. I like that. Honesty in architecture. Would you like to stay for dinner? The words were out before Emma could reconsider them. I mean, it seems only fair since you brought half of it. Daniel looked momentarily taken aback. I wouldn't want to impose. Hey, it's not an imposition, it's just dinner. Emma tried to keep her tone casual. Fair warning, though, I'm living in a trailer with a tiny kitchenette, so don't expect anything fancy. A smile tugged at the corner of Daniel's mouth. I'm not much for fancy anyway. Over dinner, Emma learned that Daniel had grown up nearby, left for college, then spent most of his career in Denver, working as a civil engineer before returning about 5 years ago. He didn't volunteer why he had come back, and Emma didn't press. When Daniel finally stood to leave, the small trailer felt suddenly emptier than it had before he arrived. Thanks for dinner, he said, standing by his truck in the moonlight. It's been a while since I've had a home-cooked meal with company. Even if the home was a trailer, and we had to eat off our laps, Emma asked with a smile. Especially then, Daniel replied, and for a moment, his usual reserve softened. Good night, Emma. The following weeks fell into a rhythm. Emma worked alongside Mike's crew during the days, learning and building. Daniel would stop by every few days, sometimes bringing vegetables or herbs from his garden, sometimes just checking on the progress. Occasionally he would stay for dinner, and gradually Emma began to piece together more of his story. He had been married for 18 years to a woman named Claire. She had died of ovarian cancer 5 years ago, which was when Daniel had left Denver and returned to New Mexico. He spoke of her rarely, but with a quiet reverence that told Emma all she needed to know about the depth of his loss. In turn, Emma shared more about her own failed marriage, how she and Robert had grown steadily apart over the years, their communication breaking down until they were like strangers sharing a house. One Saturday afternoon, when the construction crew was gone for the weekend, Emma struggled to move a heavy wooden beam into place. Need a hand? Daniel's voice came from behind her. Emma turned, wiping sweat from her forehead. Is that an actual offer of help, or are you just being polite? Daniel smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Actual offer, no strings attached. Together they maneuvered the beam into position. When it was secured, Emma stepped back to catch her breath. Thanks, she said. I probably could have done it eventually, but it would have taken all day. No shame in accepting help occasionally, Daniel said mildly, even for the fiercely independent. Any other two-person jobs on your list? Daniel asked. Emma hesitated only briefly before nodding. Actually, yes. Several. They spent the rest of the afternoon working side by side. Daniel was a skilled worker, methodical and precise. Emma found herself appreciating not just the extra hands, but his quiet company and occasional dry humor. As the sun began to set, they sat on the tailgate of Daniel's truck, drinking cold water and looking at the progress they'd made. Why adobe? Daniel asked suddenly. You could have built something faster, easier. Emma considered the question. I wanted something that would last, she said finally. Something that came from the earth here, that belongs to this place. She took another sip of water. And I think I needed to build it with my own hands, to prove to myself that I could create something solid, something real. Daniel nodded, seeming to understand what she wasn't quite saying, that after the collapse of her marriage she needed to literally construct something of her own. "Claire and I were planning to build a house together," he said after a long moment, "before she got sick. We had the plans drawn up, even bought the land." He gestured vaguely toward his property. "I couldn't bring myself to build it after she was gone, ended up putting a prefabricated home on the property instead." It was the most he had ever shared about his loss, and Emma felt the weight of his confidence. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "Yeah." Daniel looked out at the sunset, painting the mountains. "Me too." They sat in silence as the light faded, two people who had lost different things, but who understood something fundamental about each other's solitude. "Same time tomorrow?" Daniel asked as he prepared to leave. Emma nodded. "I'll make lunch." By late October, the walls of Emma's house stood complete, and it was time to begin work on the roof. The traditional Viga and Latilla ceiling, heavy wooden beams crossed with smaller wooden poles, would be one of the most challenging aspects of the construction. The day of the roof beam installation arrived with clear skies and a crisp autumn breeze. Mike brought extra workers and a small crane to lift the massive Vigas into place. Daniel showed up early, offering an extra pair of hands. By mid-afternoon, most of the main beams were in place. Emma climbed a ladder to inspect a connection point, making sure everything was aligned correctly. "Looking good up there," Daniel called from below. "Perfect," Emma replied, giving a thumbs up. She started to descend the ladder when her foot slipped on a rung. For a heart-stopping moment, she felt herself falling backward. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground. Daniel had moved with surprising speed, positioning himself to break her fall. They both stumbled but remained upright, his arms around her waist. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. Emma nodded, too shaken to speak immediately. She was acutely aware of his proximity, the solid warmth of him against her back. "I've got you," Daniel said quietly, still supporting her weight. "I know," Emma replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Slowly she turned within the circle of his arms to face him. For a long moment they stood there, closer than they had ever been. "Emma," Mike's voice broke the moment. "Everything all right?" Daniel stepped back, releasing her. "She slipped on the ladder," he called back. "All good now." That evening, after the crew had gone, Daniel stayed to help clean up the site. They worked in silence as the sun set, casting long shadows across the newly forming roof structure. "It's really taking shape now," Daniel observed, looking up at the house. Emma nodded, following his gaze. "I can finally see it. How it's going to be when it's finished." "Are you pleased with it?" "More than pleased," Emma admitted. "It's exactly what I wanted. Imperfect in all the right ways." Daniel smiled at that. "Imperfect in all the right ways," he repeated. "I like that." "Emma," Daniel began, then hesitated. She turned to look at him, waiting. "Would you like to have dinner at my place tomorrow?" he asked finally. "A proper dinner, not balancing plates on our knees in your trailer." Emma felt a flutter of nervousness that surprised her. After months of casual meals together, this felt different, intentional in a way their previous interactions hadn't been. "I'd like that," she said simply. The next evening, Emma spent more time than she cared to admit, selecting an outfit from her limited wardrobe. She finally settled on a simple dress she had barely worn since moving to New Mexico, adding a cardigan against the autumn chill. Daniel's house was, as he had described it, a prefabricated structure placed on a concrete foundation. But he had added personal touches over the years, a covered porch wrapped around two sides, native landscaping that blended with the natural desert, a stone pathway leading from the driveway. The interior was surprisingly warm and inviting. Bookcases lined one wall, filled with volumes on engineering, local history, and fiction. A comfortable-looking sofa faced a fireplace where a small fire crackled. The dining table was already set, with candles providing a soft glow. Dinner was delicious, a traditional New Mexican green chili stew. They talked easily about the progress on the house, the changing season, books they had read recently. After dinner, they moved to the living room with their wine glasses. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, casting a soft, flickering light across the room. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said, settling onto the sofa. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to." Daniel nodded, taking a seat beside her. "Go ahead. Do you ever think about starting over? I mean, building a real house here like you and Claire planned?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment, looking into his wineglass. "I've thought about it more recently," he said finally. "For a long time it felt like a betrayal somehow, moving forward, building something new without her. He glanced up at Emma. But lately, I've been thinking that maybe the real betrayal is in not living fully. Claire wouldn't have wanted me to stop at half measures. Emma nodded, understanding. That's part of why I left Chicago, I think. I was living a half-life there after the divorce, going through the motions but not really engaged with anything or anyone. And now? Daniel asked quietly. Now I'm building something real, Emma replied. In more ways than one. The silence that followed was charged with unspoken possibility. Emma was acutely aware of Daniel's proximity, the way the firelight played across his features. Emma, he began, his voice lower than before. She turned toward him, her heart beating faster. Yes. Before he could continue, headlights swept across the room as a vehicle pulled into the driveway. Daniel frowned, checking his watch. I'm not expecting anyone. A moment later, a car door slammed and footsteps approached the front porch. Daniel rose to answer the knock, leaving Emma sitting on the sofa, caught between disappointment at the interruption and relief at the reprieve from whatever had been about to happen. She heard muffled voices at the door. Then Daniel returned with a surprised expression. It's for you, actually, he said. Your daughter. Lily? Emma stood up in confusion. But she's supposed to be in Boston. Lily appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Surprise, Mom, she said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I hope it's okay that I tracked you down. By spring, Emma's house stood complete at last. Every adobe brick in place, every wooden beam secured, every window letting in the clear New Mexican light. Today, Emma was hosting a small gathering to celebrate the completion of her home. Mike Sandoval and his crew were there, along with a few neighbors she had met over the months. Lily had flown in from Boston for the weekend, bringing with her an unexpected guest, her father, Robert. I still can't believe you built this, Robert said, running his hand along one of the smooth adobe walls. He looked out of place in his expensive city clothes, but he had made an effort to be supportive. I had a lot of help, she replied, gesturing toward Mike and his team. Still, Robert insisted, it's impressive. Really impressive, Em. Emma accepted the compliment with a nod. Her relationship with her ex-husband had improved since the divorce. The distance, both physical and emotional, had allowed old wounds to heal. And you're happy here? Robert asked, his tone genuinely curious rather than judgmental. Out in the middle of nowhere, Emma smiled, looking around at the home she had created. I am. Happier than I've been in a long time. Robert nodded, seeming to accept this. Lily tells me you've met someone. Yes, Emma said simply. Daniel. He should be here soon. He's just finishing up some work at his place. As if summoned by her words, there was a knock at the front door. Emma excused herself to answer it, finding Daniel on her doorstep with a potted plant in his hands. Housewarming gift, he explained, handing her the desert sage. Though I suppose you've been warming it for months now. Emma laughed, taking the plant and leaning in to kiss him briefly. Come in. There's someone I want you to meet. She led Daniel to where Robert stood examining one of the vigas in the ceiling. Robert, this is Daniel Harmon, Emma said. Daniel, my ex-husband, Robert Reeves. The two men shook hands, sizing each other up with the inevitable curiosity of men who had loved the same woman, albeit in different ways and different times. Pleasure to meet you, Daniel said, his tone genuine. Emma speaks highly of you as a father. Likewise, Robert replied. Lily hasn't stopped talking about you since she got back from her last visit. Apparently you know quite a bit about desert wildlife. As the afternoon wore on, guests gradually departed until only family remained. Robert had booked a hotel room in Santa Fe, but wasn't leaving until the following day. He and Lily sat at the kitchen table, planning a morning hike before his flight. Emma found Daniel outside on the portal, the covered porch that wrapped around the south and west sides of the house. He was leaning against one of the posts, looking out at the sunset. Penny for your thoughts, she said, joining him. Just admiring the view, Daniel replied, putting an arm around her shoulders, and thinking about how far you've come since that first day I saw you standing on an empty plot of land. Emma leaned into him, enjoying the solid warmth of his presence. It's been quite a journey. Any regrets? Daniel asked. Not a single one, Emma replied without hesitation. You? Daniel shook his head. Only that it took me so long to offer you those pallets. Emma laughed, remembering their first real interaction. You were cautious, we both were. With good reason, Daniel acknowledged. We'd both been through enough to know that some things shouldn't be rushed. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. "I've been thinking," Daniel said finally, his tone careful. "A dangerous pastime," Emma teased gently. He smiled but continued, "I've been thinking about what comes next, for us." Emma turned to face him more fully. "What do you mean?" "Well, your house is finished. Mine needs work but is livable. We've been spending most of our time together anyway." He trailed off, suddenly seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "Daniel Harmon, are you asking me to move in with you?" Emma asked, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Actually," he replied, reaching into his pocket, "I was thinking of something more permanent." Emma's breath caught as he pulled out a small wooden box. It wasn't velvet or fancy, just a simple handcrafted container that he had clearly made himself. "I know it might seem soon," Daniel continued, his voice steady despite the emotion Emma could see in his eyes. "But at our age, I think we both know what we want. What matters?" He opened the box to reveal a ring. Not a traditional diamond engagement ring, but a band of silver inlaid with turquoise, in a pattern that echoed the mountains visible from both their properties. "Emma Reeves," Daniel said, his voice low and certain, "would you consider building a life with me? Not just homes or workshops, but a future, together?" Emma looked from the ring to Daniel's face, seeing there all the quiet strength, all the gentle understanding that had drawn her to him from the beginning. She thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment, from the broken pieces of her marriage in Chicago to the solid, earthen walls of the home she had built with her own hands in the New Mexico desert. She thought about second chances and new beginnings, about foundations carefully laid and structures thoughtfully raised. "Yes," she said simply, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, I would like that very much." Daniel's smile was like the sunrise, breaking across his usually reserved features with unrestrained joy. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as she had known it would. "I love you, Emma," he said, the words spoken with the same careful deliberation he brought to everything he did. "I didn't expect to love anyone again, but here we are." "Here we are," Emma agreed, reaching up to touch his face. "I love you too, Daniel. Thank you for helping me build more than just a house." Their kiss was sweet and unhurried, a promise of many more to come. When they finally drew apart, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Hand in hand, they walked back into the house Emma had built, the house that had in many ways built her as well. As they stepped through the door, she felt the solid adobe walls surrounding them, constructed brick by careful brick, just as their relationship had been. Both would weather storms and time, standing firm on foundations laid with patience and care. "Welcome home," she said softly to Daniel, and knew that she was finally, truly home as well.